once, MotoGP is going to have a single brand that's going to be across every category from Moto E all the way through up to MotoGP. And the paddock's welcoming Pirelli. Any more details or initial thoughts on this move?
Dorna want a single brand across all of the paddocks, so they want to get across all sorts of, all three classes. And in fact, not just all three classes, but also MotoGP, Moto2, Moto3, Moto E, Red Bull Rookies, all of the support classes like Asia Talent Cup, so that they don't have to switch brands to get into, all the way to the top. But also it's logistical. It's much easier to negotiate with one party rather than two different parties. It also doesn't matter that, during a MotoGP race, there's great big Pirelli hoardings all around there. And, conversely, when a Moto2 race is on, they're not announced as the Michelin Phillip Island Grand Prix or something.
But I think the year before last, Dave, you went to Clermont-Ferrand, right? And you saw a presentation by Michelin. I mean, this is a vast undertaking by Pirelli. I mean, this is, this is going to be a big operation, because just taking care of the MotoGP class alone is something. But then having the whole paddock it's a massive upscale.
Yeah, I mean, it's also quite fascinating, because what they've done, or what Pirelli have done coming into Moto2 and Moto3, is basically base their tyres on their superbike tyres. So the Moto2 tyres, especially now that they've switched to, 3.5-inch rims, front rims, they were basically just using pretty much exactly the same tyres as they were in World Superbikes. But you're not going to be able to do that in MotoGP, because these bikes are producing, 50 plus more horsepower than a World Superbike machine, even though they'll be going back to 850. So this is also coming at the same time as the technical rules change. So we'll be going through to 850cc horsepower or 850cc bikes, so the horsepower will drop from 300 to sort of 270, maybe 275. We're getting rid of the ride height devices, which I think is going to make a big difference in terms of just the loading of the bike. There'll be a little bit less aero, so there'll be a few changes, but they are really going to have to completely build a new structure to build custom built tires for MotoGP.
I mean, there's all sorts of questions bubbling up from this move. I mean, the first thing is this anticipated front tire from Michelin. Is that something that we could foresee now being shelved? Also, this could shuffle things. I mean, this could almost potentially end Ducati's kind of dominance.
I caught up with Piero Taramasso, their head of two-wheel motorsport, earlier today, briefly just to understand what their thinking was. And it's safe to say that they were still coming to terms with the news. They absolutely want to continue in MotoGP. And there is a rumor that I've heard that it turned into a bit of a bidding war between Pirelli and Michelin for the MotoGP contract. As Dave mentioned, they just weren't interested in going into Moto2 or Moto3, just didn't offer them the kind of feedback that they felt would be applicable to their products that they can use on the road. I did ask him also, what does this mean for the rest of your time in MotoGP? And he said, well, we've still got 2 years to go, but with regards to the new front tire, which is proposed to come in next year, they're going to test it at the Jerez tests after the Spanish Grand Prix, and then after the Aragon GP, the Aragon test, which is in June, I think. And then they'll basically see the feedback, and I guess then they'll make a sort of concrete decision whether to go one way or not. So the fact that they're not confirming it at the moment, I mean, that will be interesting. Maybe we'll be stuck with the current front tire, which probably needed to be changed in about 2021. We'll be stuck with it again for yet another year, which I don't think would be a great thing for the spectacle as a whole.
Yeah, you mentioned their nail bites. The Michelin maybe needed to change the front tire already in 2021. I would probably go 5 years previous to that. Even from 2016, it was an issue right from the opening round when I made the switch. We were on Bridgestone in 2015, and moving from Pirelli to Bridgestone was easy. They're very different tire, but the way that you ride them was actually quite similar. The Pirelli front could accept a lot. You're able to spin on the top of a Pirelli in a similar way that you can on a Bridgestone, but Michelin is completely different. I think the shake up from Michelin to Pirelli is going to require a completely different riding style. So it's exciting. It's going to be a huge change. There's certain riders who are going to be stronger right away at it. I think the likes of Bastianini, Pedro Acosta, how they ride a bike is how you're going to need to ride a Pirelli. It's already going to be suited to those guys. So yeah, it's going to be really something, the manufacturers are going to have to get their heads around, and with the tyre as well. So I think it's going to be a completely different way of riding the bike.
Guys, is this a positive move?
I think there's a massive question mark around it. It's really difficult to say at this point, Dad. You could definitely say that Michelin shook things up when they came into MotoGP in 2016, and you could argue that for 4-5 years after that, we had a kind of a golden age of great racing in the class. And from like 2016 through to maybe 2018, the rear tire really needed to be managed in such a way that you couldn't go full throttle all race long. And that led to a lot of these pretty interesting big group races where you had riders kind of just holding station for, I don't know, 3/4 of the race and conserving their rubber for a final push. And we saw, some of the greatest racing, I think, in modern times in that time. But it has probably been a bit of a frustration over the last couple of years, the fact that haven't been able to introduce this new front tire earlier. I mean, what Eugene was saying is interesting, like going all the way back to 2016. This is not a new issue. And just the fact that MotoGP bikes have radically changed in the last 5 years, I think the tire needed to change with that. So you could maybe point some of the finger of blame at Michelin for the situation. And I guess, also, as Eugene mentioned, when you have a new tire supplier come in, it does change up things quite radically. You might still have the same champion at the end of the year, but the racing is for sure going to change. I mean, just look at Moto2 for an example. Last year, I think we had 9 different winners, 10 different pole sitters, and 18 different podium finishers. I mean, that's pretty incredible variety, and showed that in certain situations and conditions, the tires were really suited to one setup and one team, one chassis, not so much the other. And then that could be reversed in other situations. So I think for 2027, we're going to have a very new landscape of MotoGP, and maybe that's what's needed, because arguably what we have currently isn't the most exciting iteration of the sport.
The character of the tyres, I mean, you said sort of, like the front gives you a lot of feedback and a lot of feel, and you could sort of like really trust it a lot. Are they sensitive? Because one of the things that the Michelins have is that they're quite sensitive to temperature. Were the Pirellis that sort of sensitive? Again, we're seeing, like Phillip Island, Pirelli are mandating pit stops, which seems, unfortunate, really.
Yeah, on the Phillip Island thing, I honestly believe that Woodsport bike can do full distance next year. It was something with the new asphalt a year ago. It was just precautionary, and then they already made the call before we went to Phillip Island this year to make the flag to flag. I think even between the test and the race, they were even reconsidering that, but they just left it as was. The Pirelli isn't as sensitive. This issue of the Michelin front, it's frustrating everybody, isn't it? It's frustrating the riders, the fans, I'm sure you guys, because it's becoming a bit of a game of chess. But the Pirelli isn't as sensitive as that. In the cold condition, it's incredible what a Pirelli can do. The likes of Assen, whenever we went there in 2019, and it started snowing. I think it was that morning when we'd been out in FP3 at maybe 9 o'clock in the morning, where the track temperature was, I think, 1.5 or 2 degrees. It was nuts. And I was cautious at the end of the back straight, the right into the left, because we've always seen crashes there. I think it was Bautista in front of me his first year on a Pirelli, and he just launched it in there. I thought, wow, that's brave. I thought I'll do it the next lap and see. It's going to go one of 2 ways, and it did stick. So that's a long time whenever the left side of the tire really hasn't been having energy put into it, and it's still grip. So phenomenal how well they can work in the cold conditions. In the really hot conditions, maybe the Pirelli does struggle a little bit more, and that's why the likes of the Suzuki 8 Hours, we see Bridgestone, and those guys are unbeatable there, because once you start getting track temperatures up towards 50 degrees, the Pirelli maybe needs to improve there a bit, but they haven't made huge leaps forward. I would say even in the last 10, 12 years, you used to ride in places like Sepang in the hot condition on a Pirelli, and it was really tough work, whereas now, whenever we went to Buriram, you'd ride on the Pirelli, and it did feel pretty good in the afternoon. So they've done a phenomenal job, and it's a tyre that I really enjoy riding. Even now, when I ride for fun, I'll ride Pirellis because you can have so much fun on them.
This could turn Pirelli into the kind of dominant tyre manufacturer for motorsport, because, they do have F1. In MXGP, they've been, the tyre of choice for a number of years. I think in Supercross, it's still Dunlop. But, when it comes to top flight motocross, Pirelli have won countless championships and consecutive years as well. is that a good thing, that kind of monopoly? Or, would we still sort of prefer to see Bridgestone, Michelin, I don't know, various types of brands slugging it out in MotoGP?
Well, I don't think Eugene is old enough to have raced during the tyre war period in MotoGP. But that was when basically Michelin who would decide who was going to win a race. So no, I don't miss that period whatsoever. The story I've told about a million times about Tony Elias winning the race in Portugal in Estoril because he had a set of the Saturday night specials made for Dani Pedrosa, who decided that he didn't want to use them, and they suited they suited Tony Elias down to the ground and all the way across the line.
I have a question for all of you guys. Pirelli actually have won a MotoGP race in the past. Does anyone know when it was? And who was the winner? And it was that boycotted race at Misano, I think.
Was that Keely then?
Yeah.
Was it Keely one?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Oh, right, because Matt Oxley was saying it was like 1958 or something with Umberto Massetti, or
maybe there's several ones then. Okay, well, I think the last one, let's say, was that Keely race.
Wasn't Pirelli's entry into MotoGP as well quite emphatic? Was Randy Mamola riding the Kigiva and was just smoking the fuck out of them around a track that we might be going back to quite soon in Guanha? I don't know if I said that correctly, in Brazil. Guanha.
Yeah. Also, Kigiva. What is up with your Italian pronunciation ad?
Well, we've already had Delinga, so whoever that is.
Delinga. Yeah. Come on.
Why stop at that?
Yeah, absolutely. Bingo card.
Mispronunciation.
Yeah, have a shot. Whoever's listening.